Good evening, and welcome to Forensics After Dark. I will be your host this evening, and for the sake of my own safety, I will remain anonymous and I will not disclose my whereabouts. Tonight we will be reviewing forensics and methods of DNA testing and the effects of forensics and its impact on today's world of crime scene investigation and similar fields. The first method we'll be reviewing is RFLP, or Restriction Fragment Length Polymorphism. So, pieces of DNA are gathered from the crime scene or from suspects and placed into the sheet of gel, in which they are then placed with the restriction enzymes, and restriction enzymes are there to cut them up and place them in different locations throughout the gel. The electrical current is what spreads it out, and after the electrical current spreads it out, the dye molecules will keep it in place. The essential step with the electrical current is known as gel electrophoresis, or gel electrophoresis. However, RFLP isn't used as much these days because it requires a certain amount of DNA. So, what's more efficient for today is STR, but with both, it ends up looking something like so after it's made more visible with sheets of certain substances placed over the gel. So STR, or short tandem repeats, requires at least 6 to 12 repeats in which the patterns found in the DNA are repeated or photocopied through amplification of PCR. This is known as, this stands for polymerase chain reaction. So because of polymerase chain reaction, it could be used on any piece of DNA, no matter how small. RFLP requires at least the size of a dime in DNA, so it's not very likely to find the perpetrator shaving or cleaning his ears in the bathroom at the scene. So yeah, short tandem repeats are the ones that is the method that's used most. This all contributes to CODIS. What is CODIS? Well, I'll tell you what CODIS is. CODIS is the Combined DNA Index System. Combined meaning it is the National DNA Index System and the State DNA Index System combined. Both of those had begun as local software projects fired by, I think it was 14 local forensic labs that originally wanted to create a place to store their profiles. Once the FBI established it as a database, today it's got over 190 labs contributing to the growth of the database. Its purpose is to give forensic scientists a main resource. Forensic scientists, crime scene investigators, people in the field of forensics and crime scene investigation would need a main resource to go to either store information or find suspects to which they can link the DNA found in the case at hand. And that's what CODIS serves for. Well, its function is very complex because it goes into 3 categories, or levels rather. They are national, state, and local DNA index system. Where a DNA profile is placed actually depends on the seriousness of the crime committed or the background of the perpetrator. However, there are some risks that most crime scene investigators have been told about. Um, for example, the genetics used could be used against um, the person who holds the DNA in the future. So they are asked to eliminate the DNA after it is used in the laboratory and after it is submitted. One person who had actually gone through that risk is Juan Rivera, and we'll go about his case after we elaborate on the Innocence Project. Now, the Innocence Project is an organization that funds DNA testing and is dedicated to the exoneration of people who have been falsely accused or prosecuted or convicted. According to their website, the Innocence Project is a national agitation and public policy organization dedicated to exonerating wrongfully convicted individuals through DNA testing and reforming the criminal justice system to prevent future injustice. So, back to the case and how it started out. An 11-year-old girl named Holly Staker in 1992 in Illinois had been raped and murdered while babysitting two younger children in a household not so far from hers. It was in the suburbs. So, main suspect was Juan Rivera, who was actually on house arrest at the time because he'd been convicted of robbery and he was under electronic home monitoring. So, 4-day interrogation led to his breaking down and giving a false confession after the police and investigators had, well, as he described it, verbally beat him up about the case and pressuring him to confess. The first signed confession that they'd written for him to sign was, as his attorney put it, riddled with such implausible and incorrect information that he'd asked them to write a second one, which Juan was also made to sign. Unfortunately, those were warranted to be used against him in court instead of the alibi of him being under home monitoring at the time of the crime being committed. The first trial was where police stated that he'd known facts that, well, only the perpetrator would know, and the confession was used against him, as well as the eyewitness of one of the children which Holly was babysitting, who was only 2 years old at the time. So once the jury had denied him death row, they had compromised with Judge Stark on life in prison. In May 2005, the DNA tests excluded Rivera as the source of semen that was found on her body. An assistant attorney named Mermel had actually suggested in court that Holly herself may have been sexually active at the time, which would deem DNA testing completely irrelevant. But otherwise, the fact that the DNA wasn't his, and the fact that he wasn't at the scene, that he had an alibi, wasn't warranted. So he was sentenced to jail for the second time. He was kept in jail. By the time of the third trial in late 2011, a different jury had ruled Rivera's conviction as something unjustified that cannot stand. Waller, the state attorney, stated to the press, quote, "Today, I believe the right thing is to bring to conclusion the case against Mr. Rivera by electing not to appeal the reversal of his conviction. Therefore, the case was dismissed, and so were the charges. After the case was dismissed, Rivera was freed from prison after 20 years and spent the next few days talking to press and reuniting with family. He quoted that once he got back out, the first thing he wanted to do was get to know his family again, as well as learn Spanish again because he'd forgotten Spanish. And that's the story of Juan Rivera and how DNA testing not only saved his life and his future, or rather what's left of it, which I regret to inform, but helped contribute one more cause to the Innocence Project and to CODIS and to the concept of justice in America in general. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Tune in next week where we'll be talking to homeless people conspiring back against the government, which should be interesting. Hope you can stand by. Thank you.